Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to do this. Again, my name is Alexis. I'm an escrow officer here at our downtown location. So I've been in with Cascade for about 7 years now. I started in our customer service department and then moved up into escrow. I've worked on transactions from vacant lots, mobile homes, all the way up into multi-million dollar shopping centers, wineries, all of that. So I've seen a lot in my time here. So I'm really excited. I love meeting with new agents and seeing you grow and seeing how we can help you here at Cascade. So we'll just dive in. And as Cam said, feel free to cut me off at any time to ask specific questions. That's what we're here for. So I want to make the most of our time. So right here, we'll just go into a little bit of opening escrow, some questions to ask your client. We'll go over reviewing some settlement statements and closing documents, reviewing a title report, what to look for as a listing agent, what to look for as a buyer's agent. And then Cam's going to touch on some of the customer service. We also have contract collections department, which is an amazing resource. We'll touch on that. And then 1031s, as he mentioned a little bit, we can go into some more details there. So just to kick it off, we'll start off with the earnest money agreement. So to open escrow, now have either of you had a transaction yet? Have you had one in escrow, gone through this process at all? Perfect. So that's what I like to hear, because it's really exciting for me to just share this with you. But until you actually do it, that's when it's actually going to all come together for you. It's just like anything. So we're going to touch on this, but until you're at the closing table going through this, that's when it really comes together. So we always say, if you can make it to the signing appointments, please do. The interaction, face-to-face, meeting everybody, it all coming together at the closing table is honestly my favorite part of the transaction. Kind of ironic to say that as we're on a Zoom meeting, but that's, the face-to-face, just that seeing your clients all come together is really where it's at. So now to open escrow, after you receive an accepted sales agreement, so your offer is accepted or you receive one on your listing and you accept it, you send the offer and all counter offers, addendums, everything to the escrow agent that you're going to be working with to establish escrow. So from there, we open escrow. You tell us if you want a title insurance policy. 99% of the time, title insurance is required and requested through a transaction. I have some horror stories that I love to share of people who didn't get title insurance and then kind of where they ended up. Just briefly, one of my favorite ones is actually they opened escrow and they said they didn't need title insurance. And we actually talked to them a little bit and we said, it's really good to have title insurance so that when you're going into title of the property, the seller was the one who could actually sell it to you. There's no chain of history, mess up on the chain. And he said, well, there shouldn't be any problems here. I bought this from my neighbor and my neighbor's a really good guy. And we said, okay, and the buyer actually ended up coming to us and saying, we do want title insurance. So we moved forward with the prelim. Well, it turned out the neighbor didn't even have the right to sell the property to the new owner. And he was trying to sell a property that he didn't technically own. So not only that, he didn't go through title insurance to purchase the property. So it had multiple tax liens on it. The neighbor's grandma was the one vested and she had passed away and there were liens from her. And he had to clear all that up. We had to get deeds from the previous people, pay a bunch of stuff that shouldn't have been his responsibility in the first place, and then move forward. So really, if they don't want title insurance, we always suggest it's a really, really good thing to have. And we can always go further into that, but just touching on that. After title and escrow are opened and we get the report going, the earnest money is deposited with the escrow agent. So we can receive a wire transfer, certified check, personal check. We like to send out a welcome email to the clients with instructions on how to deposit that money. And you can also take a check into the client trust account of your real estate agency. Now, I don't see that happening nowadays as much as, and I'm not sure if that's something that Keller does. We prefer to have it in our client trust account. With earnest money, as you might know, once it's deposited into our account, we do not refund it to anyone until, like, let's say the transaction terminates, it doesn't make it through inspections, anything like that. I will often have buyers reach back out and say, we're terminating this transaction, please refund me the earnest money. Well, that earnest money has been deposited to a client trust account. We cannot refund it until we receive a fully executed agreement signed by everyone saying funds are to go to seller or buyer, back to buyer for termination. So I actually just ran across a file pretty recently that it was from 2013 and it had $2,000 worth of earnest money still sitting in the file because the buyer and seller couldn't agree on who that is to go back to. So just a reminder that escrow, we are a neutral third party. We act off written instruction only. Once that earnest money is deposited, we cannot refund it or release it or anything until everyone agrees on where it should go. So I just like to elaborate on that. It's a common asked question that we receive. Now, not to confuse that with buyer funds to close. If you deposit $5,000 worth of earnest money into our escrow, and then you go and deposit an additional $200,000 for the funds to close, we can refund the $200,000, no problem. It's the earnest money that we have to hold and be protective of until everyone agrees, because that's the promissory. So just to touch on that, since we have time, I'm going to elaborate a little bit on each of these just to make the most of it. So do you guys have any questions regarding those? Perfect. We'll just keep going. Just feel free to interrupt me. So authorized signers. This is a big one. We like to make sure that whoever's signing your sales agreement and who's planning on signing our closing documents have the authority to do so. The LLC, does it have an operating agreement? If so, we need to see a copy of that. We just want to make sure that the member manager who is signing your sales agreement and our closing documents have authority to act on behalf of the LLC. Would not be fun if we got to the closing table and realized he wasn't even involved in the LLC and had no right to be there. So that's something that we like to review in our title department ahead of time. And the same with a trustee for trust documents. Same idea there. We want to make sure that the trustee is authorized to sign on behalf of the trust documents. So a lot of times we like to get our hands on those fairly early on in the transaction. So if you're listing a property or you have a buyer who wants to take title to their trust, it's a really good idea to just say, hey, can you have those trust documents sent over to escrow? Or just give them a heads up that we're going to be requesting those, because sometimes they have to do a little bit of digging to find those. And we like to make it as easy as possible when we come knocking and say, we need these, that they can just send those right over. So it's really helpful for us to, if they have a heads up that those are going to be requested. Power of attorney. Now, power of attorney is a document that has to be recorded with the county, meaning we need the original. Now, power of attorney, the number one thing I find is that they don't have the original document, so it can't be recorded at the Lane County Recorder's Office. And if it can't be, then we can't use it. So if they have a power of attorney and it has not been recorded and made official public record, we need that original document. So that's a really good question to ask. And we also need to review it obviously ahead of time, make sure it's executed correctly, and that whoever's saying they have power of attorney actually has authority to sign as power of attorney. I like to mention with this too, and to dive a little deeper on power of attorney, a lot of times if you have a buyer and they are saying that they want to use a power of attorney, they need to talk with their lender if they're getting a loan. There's a lot of times that a lender might not allow a power of attorney. So we like to get in front of that. Just a heads up to you, if you hear that, we need a copy, the lender needs to be made aware. Again, these are all things that later on down the line, it's not very fun if, you know, you're rushing in the 11th hour to get your buyers in to sign and they have a power of attorney that they thought that they would be able to use the whole time. We actually just had one yesterday that the seller is having to leave the country. While there's a lot of different ways now that we can sign a seller that's not in the area or in the country, she found that it was easier for her to just sign a power of attorney. So she came into our office, said that her husband could sign on behalf of her, notarize the document that we prepared, which we're always happy to do so. And now she can go on her trip and her husband can sign all the closing documents, even though she's still entitled to the property. So there are cases where it really works out and it's really helpful for everybody. But then there's other cases when you have a loan, for instance, where it can get a little messy. So just to elaborate on that a little bit. So we also need to know if any of the parties are doing a 1031 exchange. So now with a 1031 exchange, this is something that we need to make sure that we touch base with the coordinator, get them what they need, and make sure that we get what we need from them. There's documents, they need a copy of the preliminary title report, the sales agreement. A lot like with the lender, we work directly with the exchange coordinator to get them what they need, and they can get us what we need, and we just go from there. So that's just really helpful to know if they are doing one, who are they using. So we love it when we hear Cascade, because the exchange coordinator is actually right in the office behind me. So I can knock on my wall and be like, hey, Melissa, I got something coming over for you. So it's really, really helpful to have her right there. Now, if it's with somebody else, that's totally fine. We just need contact information so we can reach out and get what we need. So does the transaction include any rents or deposit from tenants? So this isn't something you're going to run across all of the time. I see it a lot because I deal with a lot of commercial transactions, or I deal with a lot of, multi-tenant properties, things like that. Now, if you take into consideration rent and deposit credits on a closing statement, that changes things significantly. You're talking a few $1,000s for a deposit, you're talking prorated rent, stuff like that. So the earlier that we can get that to make sure that our figures are balanced and right, the better. So I personally love seeing copies of the full lease. That kind of saves you from having to say, this is the security deposit, this is the rent amount, the pet amount, all of that. Just send over full copies of the lease. We'll follow up with any questions that we have as far as, hey, am I reading this right? Did this tenant vacate prior to? Am I understanding this correct, where it's a deposit plus the pet deposit for 5 cats, things like that. So we just want to make sure that we get those ahead of time. And again, feel free to send us over a rent roll. You can send us over the full lease, or even an email that says if it works best for you. As long as we get those numbers, we can put them on our statements and go from there. So, and is the buyer obtaining a loan? So this might seem obvious to some, but we need to know if the buyer's getting a loan on the property. And as soon as you have a pre-approval letter, that is amazing for us, because those pre-approval letters have all of the information that we're going to need to contact the lender and get everything going. So a lot like the 1031 exchange coordinator, there's stuff that they need from us and there's stuff that we need from them. So once you provide their contact information, we will take it from there. We will work with them directly. You are never going to be the in-between unless it's a very particular situation from the lender and I, or the lender and the escrow officer that you're working with. We just take it all. We usually loop you in if there's an issue or clarification or whatnot, but there's a lot of behind the scenes things that go on our part with the lender, probably a lot like what would go on with you and the lender directly that we're not involved in. So we'd love to see a pre-approval letter or just contact information. And again, really good about picking up the phone, just calling them and getting what we need. So hard money lender, anybody who's lending money to the buyer, whether so that kind of goes into, is it a seller, a private lender providing the financing? So we often see where the seller might be carrying the loan. This is called seller carry transactions. They're big in investment worlds. My husband and I, we want to buy all the investment property that we can, and we would love for someone to seller carry a property. It's a really, especially with high interest rates right now, it's a really useful tool to have. So is the seller going to carry the note? A lot of people don't know, but Cascade can prepare, and I don't want to speak for other title companies, but I believe other title companies you could ask them directly, but Cascade, we can prepare notes and trust deed and send it out for review. I like to get ahead of it and let you know, Not that you necessarily remember between now and when you have a note and trustee to be prepared, but there is a 3-day review period. I have ran across it a few times where one of our good clients will reach out and say on a Thursday and say, hey, Alexis, we're closing Friday. I need a note and trustee prepared for my great aunt who's lending me $500,000 to buy this. Can you get that out? I'm like, I can get that out if you give me all of the terms. However, there's a 3-day mandatory review period. That means the earliest that we can close, if I sent that note and trustee out for review, would be Tuesday of the next week. So it's just like closing disclosures from the lender. They have that review period. Refinances, you've taken that into consideration. It's that same time frame, and I just like to make everyone aware of that so it's on your radar, because the sooner the better we know the terms and can get everything out, because then we'll be ahead of that, ready to close. Now, we do not act as we can't advise at all. So we need all of the terms provided to us. So we have a whole form that we can send out to be completed. It has the interest rate, all of that good stuff. Happy to point you in the right direction as far as what we need to get it done. But we send that out and everybody can fill it out, get it back to us, and we can prepare those documents to be sent out. So if you have other questions on that, feel free to always give us a call, ask specifics, but it's a pretty neat thing that we can do because it saves sometimes attorney fees, things like that, if we're able to step in and act as a scrivener. So is a family member or a friend, third-party person providing the funds to the buyer. Now, this one here is really important for us to know, because if we receive a check or even earnest money from, an uncle providing funds, they have to sign a third-party deposit form for us, because this says that they are releasing those funds to be applied towards a purchase that they are not part of necessarily, that they are just providing funds and releasing those. So let's say somebody deposits earnest money and they are actually not part of our transaction terminates because of inspection or whatever might happen, lots of moving parts there. We do not automatically refund that money to the uncle who brought it in, who's not associated. That goes back to the buyer. And in order to do so, or seller, depending on the situation and the instructions we receive, but that does not get refunded to the third party necessarily unless specifically instructed. So it's really important to let us know if someone not associated with the transaction is giving gift funds, anything along those lines, so we can prepare our documents and send them out. They're really easy to send. We do it all the time. We get sometimes, even if they bring in earnest money to our office and we look at it and we say, well, you are not Bob Smith, we need Bob Smith to sign this. We can send it out via DocuSign. Helpful for everyone if we know ahead of time that that's coming. So is the seller a US resident, or do you have to deal with all the FERPTA stuff? So you've probably done a lot with the FERPTA. We need to know ahead of time if the seller is a foreign person for any reason, so that we can make sure to send out the additional paperwork. So it's the same thing with an Oregon resident. Now, we have a form signed at closing that says if you're an Oregon resident, we're not responsible to collect and send anything off to the state through our transaction unless specifically instructed. Now, we need to know ahead of time if they're not, because there's a whole set of forms and they're not very fun. They go into all sorts of details and you need a CPA and all of that. It's not an easy form just to sign. If your seller is out of the area and they're not an Oregon resident, let us know right away so we can get a jump on those, so that we're saying, hey, you need to check with your CPA 3 days into escrow rather than 28 when we're closing in 2 days and they haven't gotten us what we need because we didn't know. So we do our part. We reach out to them ahead of time and we say, hey, these are the documents that we need. Can you complete those and send them out? Send them back to us so we can put it on the closing statement. Now, as you can imagine, sometimes people don't get back to us very quickly. Just kind of leading into this a little bit, that it's really helpful, and you might receive a call from me, for instance, for my files. I try to handle as much as I possibly can. directly with your seller, or buyer. If I need these Oregon tax forms back, I'm just saying this because this is probably our number one form that we struggle to get from sellers, are the tax forms. And if I'm struggling to get that, I will try, but at some point I'm going to loop you in and say, hey, can you help me get in touch with your seller? This is going to delay the transaction. I need these Oregon forms back. So a lot of times these are the ones that people have to take again to their CPA and things like that. So it's really, really helpful to know. So is this a newly constructed home or a recent remodel? Now, I have worked on lots and lots of new construction files. Again, everything from remodel to, where they took it down to the studs, to working with some really prominent builders in our area who are building brand new, beautiful homes. So no matter what, we have to know if it's a newly constructed home so we can do our due diligence to confirm that the buyer's not going to be hit with any unpaid bills. So some people might know that at least in Oregon, there's a construction loan period of after 75 days of building, or during 75 days from the completion of the home, if a contractor, subcontractor, such as the plumber, electrician, anybody who's worked on the property can place a lien on the property if they weren't paid. Now, we all might want to live perfectly, think that everyone pays their bills, but a lot of times this is something that comes up. Now we have a list of approved builders here at Cascade who have, proved to us they pay their subs, they do a really good job, they make sure all of their bills are paid. And then we have some that have kind of a reputation of not paying, and then their subcontractors come and place liens on the property. So it's really helpful to know, because there's a whole process we have to go through. It's called early issue title insurance. If the buyer wants to take title of the property with subject to feeling comfortable and knowing that they have a title insurance policy in front of them that protects them against those potential liens. So I've seen this triggered the early issue for even a brand new roof, for instance, because if you think about it, roofs can cost, we just got quoted one pretty recently, almost $30,000. They can cost a lot. And if they're not paid, the roofer can place a lien on the property. And so anytime any of those things are happening, we want to know so that we're not scrambling at the closing table and somebody's telling us, I just had a brand new roof put on. I'm not sure if we've paid. Let's, figure it out. And then we're getting a call from the buyer way down the line saying, hey, some roofing company's knocking on my door saying that I have a lien on the property for $30,000. What's going on? So all of these things are things that have actually happened. And I always joke that every form is there because something happened sometime and, ruined it for the rest of us, or every warning label, things like that. But all of these things are very common. And we actually just heard one recently closed at another title company, and the title company did not do their due diligence as far as looking into the information for the new construction, and the buyer was hit with a lien. Now, luckily, a title insurance policy covers that. That's why we're here. It wasn't us. I can guarantee it wouldn't be us. But they were able to go back and say, hey, this lien shouldn't have been on there, and get it taken care of. But it does happen, especially with newly constructed homes, and a lot of people working on there, whether it's intentional or not, bills get missed and people get upset and place liens against property to be sure that they're paid. So we help protect against that a little bit, but really helpful if we know ahead of time. Now we'll just keep going. How does the seller hold title? So we touched on this a little bit as far as what we would need documentation up front. Now, is it in a trust? Is it an entity where it's an LLC, partnership, corporation, estate? Are they individuals? So a trust, again, we need a copy of the trust documents. We want to make sure the trustee or who's ever acting as trustee has authority to do so. An entity, LLC operating agreements, partnership agreement, corporation, if they have bylaws, if you have somebody who's saying that they're a president, but you aren't quite sure, we could always look on the state registry for you. Just give us a call. We have access to some of this information on public database, but again, the operating agreement and whatnot aren't public records. So just if you want to double up, sometimes I have clients who call me and say, hey, I'm getting ready to sign a sales agreement, and my seller is a corporation, but I don't know off the top of my head who the signer, their capacity. I can look on the state registry and I can say, looks like he's registered as the president of the company. This is what we're going to need, but hopefully this gets you going, and then they can go from there. So really, never be shy to give us a call, and we can look at what we're able to, even without a sales agreement, kind of point you in the right direction. Even as far as, how someone holds title, we have access to the county records. If it's questionable and RMLS or anywhere isn't quite clear and you want to see the deed or whatnot, give us a call. We're happy to pull it and send it over. So that's something that always happy to jump in and help, even before we have an executed sales agreement. Now, individuals, we want to make sure that everybody who is vested is signing the sales agreement, because we're going to question if we get a sales agreement with 4 sellers and then only 3 of them signed. We need to know where that 4th person went, because they are vested in the property. So even if that's the case, and let's say that 4th person might have passed away, we never want to upset your clients or hit a sensitive subject, anything like that. Give us a heads up and we will make sure that that 4th person doesn't reflect on any of our closing documents, and we will tell you exactly what we need. We'll say, hey, we need a copy of the death certificate. We need a copy of whatever. We can look and say, looks like they held title in a manner that that person's now needing an estate. We'll go into that a little bit next, but really, really helpful for us to know ahead of time. If you have a seller who's not able to sign for any reason, let us know and we'll work with you to make sure that we're not sending anything out with them on there, and we are all on the same page of what we're going to need to close the transaction. So, are any of the vested owners deceased? Now this says, if so, escrow will need a copy of the original death certificate. There's much more into that, as you probably know from your real estate courses. If they've done the proper paperwork, filed probate, which is what we like to see. Probate is gold to me. So if they've gone and they have done everything they need to do, probate's been filed, and a personal representative has been assigned, then that is perfect. That's what we like to see. But if, the person has passed away and you're receiving a call from the daughter, for instance, and they're saying, well, the daughter says that she has the right to sell the property because she's the only child. That might be right in some capacity, but if the proper paperwork hasn't been filed with the court system, there could be an issue and there could be a timeline there for the seller or the daughter to sell the property. We've seen small estates. I recently had one where they had a small estate, meaning the property value was pretty low. It wasn't worth going a full probate. And the uncle wanted to sell the property, but there were 4 or 5 heirs that wanted to also have a right to the property, and they had to sign off. So it was a huge family feud, ended up terminating because the heirs and the people that we would need to sign didn't agree to uncle selling it for what he was selling and didn't want him to walk away with the proceeds. So it ended up blowing up and the transaction didn't happen. So if there's anything that we can do to help jump in and keep that from happening, or, advise and say, hey, you can call me and say, I'm getting ready to do a listing appointment for 123 Main Street. The seller has passed away. Can you take a look and see what you can find? I am happy to go to our title department, which again, they're right downstairs for me. So if they don't pick up my call, I march on down there and I find them. And I'm going to say, I need to know exactly like what we're able to find and if we're going to be able to insure this property. And we can take a look into county records and advise. Now, a full preliminary title report is really our goal, our gold, our transaction, like everything. It's our guide. We'll go into reviewing that, but this, I'm talking before you even do that. So you know exactly what it is you need. I can take a look and see, it looks like probate's been filed. Daughter is in fact the personal representative. She can sign your sales agreement. She's going to sign our final closing documents. And then from there, you can move forward, comfortably knowing that you have what you need to close. It's never fun, and it has happened. I've had to make these calls myself where we receive a sales agreement and the person has passed away and the proper paperwork hasn't been filed. They have a buyer who's wanting to close, cash deal, 2 weeks, wanting to close, and I have to call and say, I'm sorry, you would need to file probate. The proper paperwork hasn't been done. This daughter does not have authority to sell this property. Once you have that, you have to wait a 4-month period for certain claims to come, things like that. We always say speak with an estate attorney or anything like that to kind of make sure that you're on the right track. But I've had to make those calls where telling somebody that we're not able to close a transaction because the proper due diligence wasn't done prior to listing the property, to know that they could sell it with the deceased owner. So I would say that when you see an owner who has passed away or whatnot, it's always good to take a pause and dig a little deeper and make sure all the ducks are in a row to sell the property. So review deeds of trust and other liens. City liens. City liens are fun, and I get to explain this to a lot of people in signing appointments, but in Eugene, Springfield, all of the surrounding areas, so Crestwell, Cottage Grove, Junction City, if you don't pay your utility bills, so your electricity bill, I don't know if it's garbage, but certain utility bills, they can actually place a lien against your property. So city liens, what we do is we do a search for all of those, whatever town it is. We just had a listing that was in Crestwell and had to reach out and say, hey, have they paid their bills? And they confirmed that utility bills are all paid up. There's no liens. Now this protects your buyers for if they go into title of a property, seller never paid their garbage or whatnot, then your buyer is hit with, $2,000 of back liens that have attached to their property. So it's a really good thing that we check, but it's something that a lot of people around don't realize will lien against your property if you don't pay. So sometimes I run across certain instances where you're selling a rental property and let's say the tenant is the one who pays the bill, right? We just need to know, and we can make exceptions sometimes as far as, hey, the tenant just owes $100 for this month. We see it's not past due. We're not going to require that $100 be paid up because the tenant's responsible. So I think this is a really cool thing from being small locally owned title company is we can make calls like that, which are really helpful. I don't know, I can't speak for the larger ones. I'm Cascade for life. There's no way I'm going anywhere else, but I don't know if the other title companies can necessarily do that and find a workaround, but it's really cool for us to be able to. So city liens, if you see one on there, it's not necessarily something that's going to be a deal breaker. We can figure something out. But it's a good thing to see. You'll see those on some preliminary title reports that come out for, again, those little surrounding cities. I think Springfield actually just started doing it as well. I haven't seen Eugene do it. I can imagine it's a really cool thing for them to have because they have to confirm if the person sells the property, they want to get paid just like anybody else who places a lien. So same thing for HOA. HOA liens do, like I said, same exact thing. They will place a lien if you don't pay your dues. So they will, come knocking on your door, tell you to pay and whatnot, but they will actually place a recorded lien against it. So I've seen one, I just saw one recently that had a violation also. So they got hit with a violation because their shrubs were too high or whatnot, just whatever they got hit with. And there was a violation lien against their property that had to be paid through closing. So they didn't want to pay it. It was a whole thing, but we figured it out. But those are on there as well. So we do a check to make sure that the buyer is not going to be hit with any liens later on. Deed of trust, line of credit. Deeds of trust and line of credit show up as a lien on the preliminary title report. So I get calls pretty often where somebody will see the deed of trust on the property and say, oh my gosh, it shows $200,000. I have paid on that for 10 years now. It should be down to $100,000. Why is it still showing that? And they only record the original loan amount. So they don't go and record every time you make a payment or anything like that. They will just record the original loan amount. So we request payoff quotes through escrow. When we establish escrow, we send off a payoff authorization to the seller or buyers or refinances, we send off an authorization so that we can access the information on their account. We reach out to the lender, we get a payoff quote with the actual amount due. And so we take care of all of that, but that's a common misconception when people see the report and they see that large lien on there. They think there's no way it's still that amount. I've paid on it for years. Not to worry, they just don't update it regularly. It costs a lot of money to record things continuously at the county. And it's a good thing that they don't, or they'd be hitting you with that bill. So lines of credit, same thing. A lot of people don't realize that lines of credit are liens against their property as well. That's how they get the better rate, because it's liened against collateral. And they might show up as a second lien on the property, their own lien altogether if they don't have a deed of trust and they just took out a line of credit for accessibility, things like that. So lines of credit, I will often get an authorization back and they will say, I don't have any liens, I just have this line of credit. Well, that line of credit is a lien. We need the information so we can reach out and make sure it's paid off. A good thing for agents to pass along to their clients too is not to take a draw on the line of credit during escrow, because we request pretty periodically updated payoff quotes on lines of credit. But if they do take a draw, please let us know so that we can pull an updated payoff quote, make sure we're paying the line of credit in full enough to pay off the loan. And, you know, because we have to make sure that's paid off. And it's happened before. The only time I've actually had to make a call post closing and say, hey, I need more money, we closed this transaction, was the seller actually went and took a draw off their line of credit the day of closing after we had requested an updated quote. Wasn't much, but they didn't realize that it was against their property after we had talked about it, but still took a draw. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that they didn't know, but took a draw off their line of credit. We were short $5,000 and I had to call and say, hey, we need $5,000 more. So if we could ever get in front of that and just communicate with your clients' lines of credit should not be pulled on during the escrow process. If they are for any reason, for repairs, things like that, we get it. Just let us know so we can update our records accordingly and save everyone the trouble of last minute adjustments. Financing statement, judgment for support statement. So I'll touch a little bit on financing statement. A lot of times we see these for UCC financing statements for heat pumps. I think EWEB had a pretty good program a while back where you could get a heat pump loan and it was interest free, things like that. And they actually place a lien against the property in the form of a financing statement. So don't be surprised if you see those occasionally, especially if you know that your seller had a lien against them. So that's something that pops up on there, just briefly going into that. So judgment for support payments. Judgments are probably the number one thing that we hear complaints about, or we hear, you know, people, it's a sensitive subject. You hear judgment against you and you think that that's automatically just a terrible thing. You've been sent to collections or this and that. A lot of people don't know that judgments are actually filed against you for child support payments, for spousal support payments. Those are filed at the court level. So when you take title of a property or sell, we have to make sure that you're all paid up on those payments, because if you're not, then it can actually lien against your property. So nothing's worse than taking title of a property and then finding out that the person you purchased it from didn't pay their child support and you have X amount liened against your property that you have to deal with. So sometimes I think that buyer judgments are a little easier to navigate because you're taking title of a property. If it's cash, we really don't care because you're going into title. It's as long as you know, hey, when you take title, this judgment against you is going to attach. I mean, cash is king, even in our sense. We're a lot easier to work with those. If you have a loan, a lot of times the lender's going to want to make sure those are paid, because it can be, they want to make sure first and foremost their loan is in first lien position and that there's no liens that are above them if they were to refinance or sell or anything. So that's one thing that we really like to touch on. I've had to field some pretty angry calls of people asking, why am I requesting stuff from their ex, which we never do without communicating with the buyers prior to, or the sellers. You know, a lot of times the state might pull out child support payments directly and we can deal with the state. lot of times they're easier than the ex, which is really saying something, but we can reach out to the state and get the information that we need. Sometimes we got to go straight to the ex who they're paying to So it's really a tricky situation, as you can imagine. Some are, it's way better to reach out to some. They're like, they're my best friend. And then there's others who are like, don't you dare call her, and are very angry that we are requesting this information. So if you see those, we can always figure out the best course of action. We never make calls and reach out to people without figuring out the situation. Child support judgments are probably right up there with the things that upset people the most, but I like to say that it also depends on which side you are on it, because if you are having to confirm that it was paid, that, you know, you might be a little upset that we're having to do that. But if you're taking title of a property and you get hit with the sellers because it wasn't confirmed that it was paid, then you'd be pretty upset too. So really, we try to just make it very convenient for them. We have local couriers. We offer to send people to people that we need to sign, and talk the client through the process to make sure that it's as easy as possible for them. So just a little bit on that. So do the vested owners match the seller's name on the contract? So this kind of goes back to my first story about the guy who bought from his neighbor. Now the prelim came out on that because the buyer ended up wanting title insurance, and the guy who was selling it to him wasn't the person that was vested on the prelim. So then they went, uh-oh, and called, and we dove into where that all went wrong. So the same thing applies here. Now, if it's on RMLS and it says, you know, Jane Doe is the seller, and then you get the prelim and it's not her at all, then that's a red flag. You want to figure out why it's showing differently. So then we can dive into that. I always say, please call, please pick up the phone or email if that's easiest for you, and just ask us, hey, can you explain this to us? And we can give you just an update on why it is that way, what we're suggesting happen, what we want to do, kind of our plan of action to clear up that title. So it's a case by case. That's why I love this position and this job, is that no matter what I get, what transaction I have, it's always going to be different. So every single one, sorry, they're drilling outside of our office here. Hopefully you can still hear me, but they'll be done soon. Every single transaction is different, and we just go through it and we figure it out. So access restriction. Now, no one wants a landlocked piece of land. So if you see an access restriction on the prelim, chances are that they never had actual legal access to the lot. Again, I've closed a lot in these last few years that I've been here at Cascade and worked on a lot. I had one recently within the last few months that they were like, there's a road there. There's no way that there's no access to this lot. There's a road that everyone's using. Well, it turns out the road everyone's using was never properly recorded. And so they didn't have the right to use that road. And if that person were to sell their property, who was letting them come through theirs, and the new owner were to say, we don't want people driving through our property anymore, that would be a big problem. So we confirm that there's an easement to the property, that there's access, that and that's all reflected on our report. Now, I personally, if I receive a prelim and I see that there's an access issue, I will point that out in an email or a call, and I'll say, hey, I took a look at the prelim. I look at all of my prelims that come out right when they do, and then again when I'm reviewing prior to getting everyone to sign, and I say there is an issue with the access on this. Sometimes people are like, oh, we're working on an easement, it'll be fine, they don't care. Other times it's a deal breaker. So that's one thing to really pay attention to. Liens against the property by the IRS or government agencies, same kind of thing. We have to make sure they're paid. So federal tax liens can be crippling. I just had one pretty recently that actually the property was selling for, I think it was, for about $400,000, and she had a federal tax lien on the property for $1.5 million. So everybody called us just very panicked that the prelim came out with that, and understandably so. It was very concerning. It felt like the seller wasn't going to have enough money to pay off her liens and sell the property. Now come to find out, we were actually able to, the seller had to reach out to the IRS and release this property for all of the proceeds. So we made it work. It wasn't a deal breaker. Each one is a little bit different. So hopefully you can still hear me.
Is that really loud for you guys, or can you guys hear okay? It's all good? Okay, okay. We can hear it on our end, but yeah.
Just want to make sure. So again, we'll just keep going here. If you see a federal tax lien or state taxes, anything like that, don't panic too much. Feel free to give us a call, ask for an update on where it's at, but we'll work directly with the people to make sure that we're getting it paid off and that we're not leaving the buyer high and dry with tax liens. Part of our job here, and we'll make sure it gets done. Deeds of trust showing names other than the seller. Same thing when you see a vested owner who's not your seller. It's probably a reason for concern. This might be a shocker to most, but a lot of times those big banks and other places don't do the proper paperwork to release their liens after they're paid. So they just don't do their job. They don't release the liens. And that's where we come in. We make some calls. We figure out what we need to do. That's the number one thing I see when you see a deed of trust that's on the property that's not the vested owner. It's because a previous owner, they paid it off and it wasn't taken care of properly. Now, not all cases are like that. There are some that don't end up as easy as us calling, but those are, again, we go through that together. A lot of times, I'd say 9 out of 10, it's as simple as us getting what we need to get from the lien holder, confirming they've been paid, and that will release the lien from the property when we go to sell. And we look at the note section. We'll go through a prelim and you can see what I'm referring to as far as a note section, just as if there's any judgments against the buyer. That again, we just talked about, those can be whether professional credit service, if they had something that went, or household support, child support, things like that. So we just want to always note that. We'll make the call as soon as we receive a judgment search from a buyer, and we'll get that going. So now we'll go through just some closing documents, how to read a closing statement, which if you haven't purchased or sold or anything, these can look pretty foreign. The more you see, the more you do, the more closings you go to, these will become very familiar. So we'll go through a settlement statement. We'll look at a prelim together, escrow instructions, earnest money addendum deed, and some government forms. So these are all really helpful just so that you can become a little bit more familiar with them. Oops. And we'll see if we can pull this up. I'm just trying to click on that. They often make fun of me that I'm really bad at technology. This is the prelim, not pulling it. Oh, no problem. We'll work through it. So the prelim's not wanting to pull up, but we can also, if you want to reach out to me for some examples on these, I can send them to you too. So it's okay, we got it. Okay. We'll go through, we'll just finish up here a little bit. So again, the prelim's not pulling up for actual examples, but I have some really awesome ones that have everything white out so that there's no personal information that I can send to you. So feel free, I think Cam's going to share some of my contact information when this is all done. So you can email me, I will send those out, and just good to get your eyes on them ahead of time. When I meet with people face to face, we go through these documents too. So the Alta settlement statements, you can kind of see a little bit what that format looks like. It's going to be a debit section and a credit section. A lot of times buyers don't realize that their earnest money is credited towards their final closing costs. So sometimes that's something that isn't realized throughout the transaction. So anyway, that's always going to show in that credit section, as well as seller contribution to closing costs, the loan amount, things like that. At the end of the day, we want to make sure all of the debits and credits balance out and that it all reflects. And always with closing documents, I I personally send a closing statement to my agents prior to scheduling the appointment, whether their clients are getting, a significant amount of proceeds or they need to come in with money. No matter what, I get those out to the agents because, first of all, I don't like surprises at the closing table. I want to make the signing as lighthearted and fun, especially after a long transaction with a lot of emotions and stuff. It's really nice to come together at the signing table and just kind of have it all fall into place and be very happy and not have any surprises on the closing statement. So I send those out to my agents prior to scheduling. I say, hey, here's a copy of the closing statement. Please review, make sure everything looks good on your end, sellers, your commissions listed correctly, things like that. Buyers, like this one we're looking at here, it has Oregon Bank, the loan amount, and then any loan fees. A lot of times the closing statements on the buyer side especially are not going to be a huge surprise because they've received multiple closing disclosures leading up to that. And it doesn't change drastically up until closing in most situations, but I always send it ahead of time so that you get your eyes on it before you're there. So during closing too, we go through the preliminary title report, which I'm happy to send you a blank copy of. Your first transaction, you'll receive that in the email. If it's with Cascade, or even if you just want a second opinion or anyone to look at it, feel free to give me a call and I can look at it. We can go through each exception together. We can really dive into it and make sure that everything's understood. We can't advise too much because we're, again, a neutral third party, but I can at least point you in the right direction or tell you who you should reach out to if there's a concerning exception on there. So escrow instructions, those are our mutually signed instructions by buyer, seller, saying that we are a neutral third party. We act off of written instruction only, goes into a lot of our forms, goes into tax prorations, how we determine those. And it also kind of covers a little bit if there's anything post-closing that the clients agree to help us out and work with us to resolve any of that. So it's going to be resolving if there's, like I said earlier, at the closing day, the seller went out and withdrew a bunch of money from their home equity line of credit and didn't inform us at closing. And we had to come back to them and say, hey, we need you to help us make this right and pay off your loan. And our escrow instructions hold them accountable for that too, and say, you will help us resolve anything. If there's commission and you sent us the wrong commission amount for some reason and we went off of that, and then you were like, we need to make this is actually it. We can also work, there's different situations and we can always help. And those also are a lot of times incorporated in our escrow instructions. So we're happy to send a copy of those as well. Earnest money addendum. We have a earnest money addendum saying all contingencies have been met that we have signed at the closing table. Sometimes I find if the seller or buyer is signing way ahead of time and they're not quite comfortable signing that yet, we don't push. I just say, this says all contingencies have been met. We have the clear to close once we have, money to pay the sellers. I always joke with them that we don't record that deed until we can give them their funds. And we just want to make sure that everything's in line. And sometimes they're not comfortable doing that. That's one that we don't force their hand, and we can always send it post-closing or post-signing via DocuSign, anything like that. So now the deed is what gets recorded at the courthouse, placing the buyer into title of the property. This one is the one that some people are nervous about signing ahead of time, the emotional document, because it's signing away your right to the property, and I explain to sellers often. I just had yesterday a great signing with an elder couple who have been in the property forever, and she was a little emotional signing the deed. She said it felt as if, that was making it official, and in a way it is. It's not official until it's recorded over at the courthouse and stamped, but it is the one that takes you out of title of the property. So that one there is a boilerplate deed. Sometimes we get special exceptions, things on there, but we prepare that deed and record it when the time comes. So government forms, again, the tax forms, 1099, the good old FERPTA, all of those guys we have completed at the closing table. A lot of times if we need additional information, that's what I was saying earlier on, we want that information so that when it comes time at the closing table, I'm not putting a FERPTA form in front of someone and turns out they don't have a U.S. taxpayer identification number or something along those lines, and we're scrambling and not able to close, things like that. So Those forms are ones that we also go through at the closing table. And then loan documents, of course, if they have a loan. A lot of times people will come in to sign and they'll have 5 or 6 documents through escrow, just these ones that are listed here. And then they're there for another hour signing 100+ pages of loan documents. So, all right, so then we're going to go into just some customer service. We'll hand it off to Cam here pretty soon, but I'll touch on net sheets a little bit because that's something that I can assist with, or any escrow officer, whoever you're working with. Our website is actually amazing as well. If you go to cascadetitle.com, they have a whole thing there where you can go on and enter in the sales price, expected payoff, anything. We have a pretty busy, respected agent who she goes on lots of appointments for listings and whatnot. And prior to each of her appointments, she reaches out to us and says, these are the figures. Can you give me just a net sheet at this sales price, at this sales price? And or she might do it herself if it's after hours, or you know, we're not available, or she needs it you know, during the weekend or whatnot. But she comes very prepared. I like to think that that's part of why she's so successful, because she is able to go to those listing appointments and have all of those that Cascade has helped her with, and present a really strong offer to the seller of what they're going to be able to do, what they would do if they didn't use an agent versus what she could get, you know, all of those. So it's pretty cool. It's a really good thing to have. And you're always welcome to email us, and we can draft up a net sheet, use our website. If you do send it to us, we just need the basic information that you would probably expect to see on there. So sales price, if there's a payoff, what you roughly expect the payoff amount to be, commission, things like that. And we will calculate the title and escrow fees. Title and escrow fees are based off of the sales price and loan amount of the property. So if you go and you do a listing appointment and you present that for $400,000, and then they say, well, I actually think I can get 500 out of my home. Sellers always think that, right? I actually think this. Our fees are going to change based off of that. So it will probably increase a little bit because the sales price increased, or decrease if it goes down a little bit. So there's a calculation, and they're based off of that sales price. So just keep that in mind, that if the sales price adjusts, so do our fees. That's what they're all based off of. So now we'll offer, maybe if there's any questions through anything I went through before handing it off to Cam. I think he's going to give, like I said, my contact information, and you're welcome to call me, email, anything like that. We can follow up with some of those documents that we had sent over, and just see, you know, I'm really excited for you guys. I hope that see you at the closing table sometime. It's genuinely my favorite thing, is working with new agents and first-time home buyers. I think that at the end of the day, that's kind of why we're here, for people to get into homes or sell, you know, those homes that are sentimental, and help people. And I think that, you know, we have a lot to offer from Cascade, and it just really makes me happy to do that. So do not hesitate to ever reach out to me, and we'll hopefully see you in the future. So were there any follow-up questions from anyone? No? Okay. Well, if you think of any, like I said, feel free to give me a call. But thanks for hearing me out and talk about title and escrow. And
thank you for all the examples and the way that it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
All right.
All right. Thank you, guys.
So no doubt about it, the title and escrow side of things is super diverse, and it's very situational. But these gals at Cascade, and escrow officers in our community, it's their job to be a resource to you, to walk you through the process and be on your team. So that's what we kind of do in our role. I'm kind of in business development, marketing, and so we want to, you know, pair you with the right people and help you guys with your business, so you have someone to go to. If you called me and asked me a transactional question, I'm going to say, let's get Alexis on the phone, because I don't have that that background or skill set. So I think I kind of got wind. I think Abby has met with Lexi, I believe, and Rosie got to meet with Cheyenne. I'm not sure if Caitlin and other are in this area, have met with us, but I'm gonna go over a couple tools and services. You guys might have seen some of these before, but I want to chat about them. as a just kind of as a benefit. We'll just do it like that, I guess. So we kind of talked about Cascade briefly, but something really special about Cascade is we are locally owned and operated. So we've been locally owned and operated for over 70 years in our community. We're third generation family owned, and it's something pretty special to be a part of. It also makes us, we're smaller in a sense of, we're not a large corporation that does business all across the United States or other countries, but we're very, very good at Lane County. We're very, very good at Oregon. We've been doing it for a very, very long time. And so we generally, to most clients, stand out in accuracy and kind of knowledge in our community, as well as just history. We talked about the collections department and 1031 exchange departments. Those are both in-house. And so if you have either of those come up, feel free to talk to your escrow officer you've met with or Alexis. There's no better place as far as making the transaction easy for you as well as your clients. I absolutely love the concept of prospecting and farming and helping you guys get information you guys might need. So we have access and we have programs, to all the real estate in our area. So we have information on who owns the property, when did they buy it, down to how big is it, how many bedrooms, how many baths, how many square footage. You guys have, I think, access to ARLID through Keller. It's pretty diverse. It's a huge program. We have someone that is here 8 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, purely for requests for you guys. So if you guys need to know deed information, if you guys need to know property history, transaction history, or just, hey, how many acres is this parcel? I'm really curious. My client wants 5 acres. This might be perfect for them. So, so talking with our marketing team for the farming and prospecting, we have so many different ways we do it. We would help most people with, right now, we're helping people find their buyer's needs. So we have a lot of people that say, all right, my client wants 3-bedroom, 2-bath, but they want newer builds, so built it in at least 2010 or newer. They want a big lot, so let's make sure it's at least 0.2 acres. They want to be Ferry Street Bridge. Their kids go to Sheldon, so let's make sure it's within a mile of Sheldon High School. So that's a very specific list. And so we can pull all the properties that fit that criteria for you, and then provide you with kind of some information and on how to get a hold of them, send them a postcard, door knock, or even programs to kind of help you get their phone number individually. We do a lot of radius things. So if you have your first listing, or if you have a listing coming up and you want to tell the neighborhood about it, I always like this strategy. People want to live next to people that they like. So if I'm in my neighborhood and I have a good friend of mine looking to, buy a home, the first thing I'm gonna do is call them. Hey, I got a flyer in my mail. There's a house going on up on my street. I'm calling my friend, and that, you kind of help people in the community also, tell people about your home. We do a lot of just listed postcards. We do a lot of just sold postcards, as far as helping you get the information on who to give those to. And then the outside the box stuff for farming is generally like acreage or zoning, or proximity to water. So people like, I want to be on the river, I want to be on a golf course. We could do kind of really unique stuff. So if you have someone that says, I'm just pre-approved for 450, I don't care where I am, a little bit different. But if you have some very specific buyer, we would love to help you get the listing as well. REI Source is a program. So we have our customer service department. They're there, like I said, 5 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night, purely for requests from you guys. But if it's a weekend and you need some information, the REI Source program is something that you have access to. We set you guys up for a login. We pay for it. And you guys just get a kind of a mobile friendly property search program. It's good nationwide. So if somebody calls you and says, hey, I'm look at this property in Washington, instead of kind of going in the dark at it, you could pull it up in concept on REI Source. Very similar to the list kit you would get on ARLID, but we just have it as a resource for when we're not working with you. So if you're interested in REI Source, chat with me or chat with your marketing person that you've met with so far. we just put this on here. They're third-party marketing programs. You guys have a marketing gal, to my knowledge, does a great job. But if you're looking to do your own postcards, we just think Bear Printing and Corfact does a good job historically. I lean towards Corfact for kind of a lead generating benefit. You can do postcards with a unique login code that's unique to not only their property, but also you. So for example, if you sent me a postcard, it would say, hey Cam, the market's hot. I have buyers for your home. To see what your home is worth, go to, and I would have a unique login code that's just for my house. On the back end, once I sign in, then they see your information. So all of a sudden it's Rosie providing me my information on my house. And then the back end, for you, you get to see who signed in. So it's a good way. A lot of times people talk about postcards being kind of spray and pray, right? Let's just send out 100 and I hope I get a phone call. This puts the lead generation in your hands a little bit. It's a 3% success rate in the first mailing that somebody signs in. So you send 100, their algorithm says that 3 people are going to log in and see what their home is worth. What you do with those 3 people is up to you. You could put them on a different drip campaign. I've had clients overnight them a CMA on their property. I've had clients go door knocking and go introduce themselves. You're just trying to hit them with their interest. What is my home worth? And if it's the time that they're looking to sell, you get to kind of jump in. Being consistent on a neighborhood pays off, or a certain farming criteria. After the 3rd mailing, it jumps to 8 to 11%. So they keep seeing Rosie providing value, talking about the market, talking about their home is worth, and then they're like, all right, let's see what this is all about. They log in, and you get to kind of see what that back end looks like.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt? What did you say that unique code was from again?
So that's a part of the Corfact third-party marketing program, and it's just Corfact.com, COREFACT, and they have a ton of different postcard kind of designs, but I would really pick the ones with the login code. It's a very non-threatening website. I believe it's like myhomeprice.com, and then I just have a login code on my postcard that's all set up for you. And then, but because you send it out, it's your headshot. It's got your contact information, Keller Williams, and all that. If you guys have met with a lender, you can co-brand. So, and if you guys need help with us, we love introducing you guys to lenders. But so you could co-brand, and the lender could pay for half, and you could pay for half. So all of a sudden, you're right around 58 cents, 56 cents per postcard mailed. So 100 costs you, like, call it $60. Team up with a lender, you can either double the amount of people you hit. You can send 200 postcards for the same 60, or it costs you $30. And I would always recommend teaming up with a lender. It helps them, it helps you, and it shows well, because what you hope is they're like, all right, I don't really know if I want to sell, maybe I'll call the lender first to see what I'm pre-qualified for. If that lender is moral and, hey, you got a call from our farm, they're going to send them right back to you, and vice versa. They get a call from you about you're going to send them to that lender. So yeah, list kits these are just like property profiles. They're detailed information on the subject property. So legal description, bed, bath, square footage, lot square footage, building type, who owns the property, when they buy it. So these are just good things for you guys to pull, but we want to take stuff off your guys' plate. So like Alexis said, if before we have clients going into to show 10 properties in a day or in a weekend, kick us those 10 properties. We'll pull reports on all of them for you. We'll email them to you, make it really easy on you. You guys have probably seen real estate reports. Some companies call them home books. And these are just really detailed property booklets about a specific property. You'll see them in open houses. They'll have neighborhood demographics. They'll have school demographics. They'll have custom mapping. They'll have local service guides. We provide those. They show really well. If you pick up an open house for somebody and they don't have a real estate report, ask us. We'll make one for you. It'll provide some talking pieces, some browsing pieces. The analytical minds really like the real estate reports. Altos reports are pretty neat. These are basically, it's a market snapshot of any given area. I always say it's as big as Lane County or as small as an individual zip code. So What's the market doing in Lane County? We can send you that information, average sales price, days on market, average rent. But what I think it's valuable is probably cities the most, where you can look at why is average price point in Cresswell so much higher than average price point in Veneta or different outlying areas around our community, or what's the difference between 97477 and 97478 of Springfield. So it allows you to really start getting knowledge on the market, getting knowledge on surrounding areas in the city, understanding where Cresswell sits, days on market, how many listings they have, what the average price point is, things like that. So Altos is something that we provide. We send out to you guys twice a month. And I'm going to put my contact in the chat before I'm done, and you guys can email me or email Alexis, and we're here to help. Classes and education. Every title company is going to provide classes and education. We just try our best to stand out and provide you guys really, really unique, hot topics. Not the kind of just daily, some people are going for the CE credit, which is great. A free CE credit and a free breakfast burrito is a great way to spend an hour and a half. But we want to try and provide really outside the box classes. So this month, we have a really cool one. We have an economic forecast from a real estate economist and an occupational economist. They're going to talk about what jobs are coming into Lane County in Oregon, what jobs are leaving, what jobs salaries are increasing and decreasing, as well as the housing economist will talk about who's moving here and why, who's leaving here and why, and just anyway, really, really cool stuff. So make sure, keep in touch with us. We always post our classes on social media, but we try and do really cool. We did a really cool flood class. We did Ramjack a couple months ago. What did we do last month? We had a good one last month. We've done rental law classes. We do really cool stuff. So make sure you're tied in with our social media pages, or your information is with us, and we'll send our email blasts out. These bottom two are kind of email blasts, and to be honest, they're pretty specific. So if you're not interested in either of these, don't sign up for them, because it would just be a hit in your inbox, and you'd kind of be like, another email. But Hot Links is exclusive to Cascade, and it's really exclusive for commercial and investment brokers or investors. So there's really no RMLS for commercial properties. There's LoopNet, and there's some of these different programs that cost commercial brokers a lot of money to sign up for and post on. So Cascade came up with this way before my time, of really just an email broadcast system, letting all the commercial brokers know what they have coming up, what was just listed, or any wants and needs. And so if you find yourself working with commercial heavy investors looking for like apartment complexes, quadplexes and above, multi-unit projects, think about Hot Links. If it's not for you right now, that's okay. We have people sign up for it just for, you might have somebody come to you with a commercial property and you're like, how do I get started? Hot Links is a great way to start, because you're gonna send it to everybody who is a player in the commercial world, and you're gonna look really good because you're gonna have the listing, but you're gonna be able to blast it to everybody and have people talk about it. So Hot Links is great, but it's unique. Notice of default list. It's a touchy list in concept. It is a notice of everyone who has the first default on their loan. So they've missed their first mortgage payment and things like that. It is public record. It is a phenomenal tool if you look at it from the benefit of helping somebody, from the benefit of somebody maybe in a tough spot. You get to help them sell their house and get out of there without losing money and things like that. Some people call it a pre-foreclosure list, but it's a really good tool to get kind of a heads up on what might be coming on the market soon. And if you have a strategy and or a buyer process where you look at the house and you're like, oh my gosh, this is kind of perfect for my buyer, there's a strategy behind it, and talk to your principal broker or talk to us about ideas on how to treat that. During COVID, you couldn't default on your loan, so people were like, where's your NOD list? We didn't have one because there was no NODs. Slowly but surely, we're starting to see them more and more, and we're seeing some foreclosures start to go into process. And so it is a tool for a really proactive agent that wants to think outside the box, do some cold calling, do some door knocking, and work on some solution focused for some possibly people in some tough times. So I'm going to put a couple things in the chat, and no need if you don't need it, but just in case. So this is my email. Email me anytime if any of those tools seem interesting, but you're like, all right, what'd you say about that Altos program? I want it. Let me know and we'll get you set up. There's my cell. And here is Alexis's email. mathis@castatel.com. And if you need her, you can just call our main line and ask for Alexis, and we're ready to go there. Anything on like the marketing side or introduction side or industry questions you guys are thinking about these days as you're getting started and rolling? No? Good deal. I like it. Well, like I said, I like the small group. To me, it feels more intimate, and it was nice to see your guys' faces and chat, and I appreciate your guys' time. So hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'm sure I will see you guys all around soon.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care.